What conspiracy theory do you fully believe is true? You/sympathetic villain commented on a similar post years ago and I saved his comment because I thought it made a lot of sense. See below for the comment. American public education is purposely declining to promote consumerism and make a more subservient population. For example, public schools used to teach home economics, woodshop, or auto shop. By cutting the budget for these programs, you're going to end up with adults who don't know how to cook, so they spend all their money at restaurants, so they spend all their money on clothes, have an understanding of how tools work and make small repairs, so they spend all their money on handymen or repairmen, or take care of their cars, so they spend all their money at car dealerships or auto shops, also getting ripped off because they are completely dependent on what the mechanic says instead of having their own pool of knowledge to draw from. Then you get to homework. We are teaching children and young adults it's okay to work all day at school, then do additional work at home. With so many companies changing to a salaried position, it's perpetuating that it's expected to do some work at home and to not get paid for it. After all, you did it your whole life with homework, so why should the workforce be any different? Edit. Thanks to everyone commenting, this is an incredible discussion and I've loved reading what everyone has posted. Edit. It was brought to my attention that having the ability to sew in order to make small repairs and alterations to clothing, reattaching a button, darning a sock, closing a tear, etc., is more of a money saver than actually making your own clothes from scratch. Thank you for pointing this out, you/Safo That the tobacco industry has driven the VAP bans, aka flavor bans, across the country by promising more money to states. There's this misconception that Big VAP is the same as Big Tobacco, and a lot of that has to do with Juul, who is owned by Altria. Juul didn't even start out as Altria, but they eventually bought it. When Juul wasn't owned by Altria, they had more tame ads, and while they were the choice of teens, they weren't explicitly targeted. Once Altria bought Juul, some funky shit went down. Juul ads began having more colorful and cartoonish ads, or what most people would classify as ads appealing to children. Every tobacco company has to do anti-smoking initiatives by law, and when Altria bought Juul, there were reports of reps doing those anti-smoking talks to teens, then advertising Juul when teachers looked away. The truth is owned by the tobacco companies. Anyone notice a difference between their old smoking ads and current vaping ads? Their old smoking ads were obnoxious AF, which is actually a tactic they've used for a while. By making their anti-smoking PSA obnoxious, fewer people would take them serious, causing less of a dent in their cigarette sales. Notice how most of the Truth's anti-VAP ads aren't obnoxious? Best part is, long after Altria bought Juul, Juul was in a California court, and their attorney literally said, "Your Honor, can't you see that this is all a tactic by Big Tobacco to stop vaping to get their customers back? Juul is Big Tobacco." I can't help but feel they did that to make those of us seeing this shit sound crazy. In reality, many adult vapers actually use since many states have made it so only pods are sellable, refillable tanks instead of pods. Most vapes you find in gas stations and pods found around are owned by tobacco companies, and there's a massive quality difference. Using a gas station vape or a pod feels no different to me than smoking, and I got respiratory infections like I did when smoking with them. On the other hand, most refillable liquids were made by small businesses and many of those have zero interaction with tobacco. A lot of those get their nicotine from tomatoes and tea, not tobacco. So, Big Tobacco saw zero from small vape businesses. There's also a huge quality difference, in that I can feel my lungs healing from my years smoking with the small business, refillable juice, while the tobacco-owned pods make me feel like I'm reopening smoking wounds. The thing about the flavor ban is, a lot of us actually don't really care about flavors. Like, yeah, my coffee cheesecake is a nice bonus, but what I care more about is being able to breathe. Only the refillables do that for me. However, If there's no flavors, how can a business stay around? I mean, all they'd sell is tobacco flavor, and that's not enough to keep a small business open. That's what's so ironic about the flavor bans. Everyone says it's to hurt big tobacco, but in reality it's just given them a monopoly again. Only big tobacco can afford to only sell tobacco flavored products. The small businesses we should be helping fight big tobacco have been closing down because they can't compete with big tobacco anymore, thanks to these laws. Then what do the states get from this? More money. Vaping hadn't fallen under the traditional tobacco taxes, and they didn't give money for the Mazars Settlement Agreement, MSA. What the MSA did was give states a certain amount of money for each pack of cigarettes sold. 50 cents per pack was the highest some states got, and if you look at the timelines, the states that got that much were the first to enact flavor bans, while states that got less dragged their feet. Which this all sucks, because I try to tell anyone anything positive about vapey flavors, they think all I care about is a quick buzz. No, what I care about is having a safer alternative to improve my health. Smoking did a number on me, but I've actually gotten healthier after starting vaping. And thanks to refillable tanks, I've been able to titrate my nicotine to now where I've got 0.5 milligrams of nicotine per ml, and will be able to stop altogether in a month. That's not something you can do with traditional cigarettes or pods. Then people will tell me propaganda that easily verifiably false from evidence-based studies or my own experience. I mean, I've actually told doctor that with the flavor bans, if all I can get are pods, a part of me feels like smoking again since it won't make a difference, and it's hilarious to see them go from, vaping is worse than smoking, to, wait. No, smoking so much worse, you shouldn't switch back. Most of all, what I don't understand is, smoking and vaping is 21 in the US now, like alcohol. Why does alcohol get to have flavors, but when vapes do it's considered too appealing to kids? How is flavored alcohol also not too appealing to kids? If 21 is good enough to allow alcohol flavors, why isn't it for vaping? The fight against flavor bans isn't about some fleeting pleasure, it's about being able to make more choices with our health, but then it takes away money from states and big tobacco. Similar conspiracy thing amongst my friends at our old high school. Except our conspiracy is just now being confirmed 5 years later after graduation. For privacy's sake I won't drop his exact name, but we had nickname for him that kinda played off of it. He gave off huge molester vibes, so called him Malengal. Basically our math teacher was weird to say the least. He always greeted specific girls overexcitedly when they entered the class. Would spend extra time helping them with their work. Let them retake tests and pretty much tell them all the answers. And would get uncomfortably touchy on school vacation trips. Of course most of this behavior was directed towards the attractive, social, and outgoing types so that their reciprocation sort of downplayed how suspect he was acting. Turns out earlier this year one of the students reported being cornered and touched by this man. She was a freshman. The police got involved but I don't think anything has really come of it so far. He did lose his job though. I worked at a MCD's about 14 years ago, I was in my 30s at the time. The manager was just a kid, and never really provided much direction. I wasn't a kid and actually had a good work ethic, so I was scrupulous about cleaning, countertops, inside the fridges, all the machines, under the machines. You get the idea. I'd been there about 4 days when I decided to check out the ice cream machine and see if it needed mix, or cleaning, or new hot fudge/caramel in the pump thingies. I had not done this before. I checked the mix, it was fine. Wiped down the cabinet and inside where the mix is hooked up. Then I checked the caramel, kinda low, so I filled it. Then I went to check the hot fudge. There was mold in the hot fudge thing. It hadn't been cleaned in so long that big splotches of mold had grown on the inner top and sides of the container. I immediately showed the manager and told him I was going to go wash it and replace the hot chocolate. He told me to put it back in the cabinet, where it could be used, and to not worry about it. I looked at him like he was crazy, took the thing back to the sink, and started washing it. He came back, fucking 18-year-old kid, trying to lord over a grown-ass woman about washing mold out of a food container, and was telling me that the hot fudge was fine and not to worry about it. I continued washing the fucking container. I finished washing it all out, disassembling and cleaning all the pump parts, which looked like it had never been done, so gross, then getting it all back together. All while the manager pranced around like he had to pee, telling me that it was fine, and that customers would never know. Like, dude, I know. As a chemist, I don't even think the making drugs theory makes sense. It's really easy to get a stable 100C temp, just stick a flask in a boiling water bath, and the difference between 79 and 100C isn't really that significant for making any street drugs. Plus I think it would much easier to just use a sous vide to make drugs which has a more stable temperature, and from what I see online they don't block out that range. However, the fact that every single manufacturer does this means it must have a reason. Crazy. Not sure if crappy Chinese manufacturers etc. would even care about people suing them for chicken temp. I wonder if the frequency of electric current or the energy of the magnetic field produced in that temp range somehow interferes with common household devices. Or damages the induction cooker somehow. Maybe it blocks out the government microchips controlling our thoughts LMAO. I'm now invested in this conspiracy theory and will think about it often. In my city there was a pizza place that was open for many years in a prime location that had trash pizza according to the only person who I ever knew who ate one from there. Never saw any customers ever, despite its distinctive building and location 2 blocks from downtown and on the edge of a residential neighborhood. 4 blocks from the big community college. Started dating a boy who told me one day that his dad and my other friends' dads were lifelong family friends. The other friend's family owned that shop. My boyfriend told me it was a front for smuggling jewels and diamonds. Told me a tiny bit about it. Assuming he didn't know what he was talking about and was dumb, he probably meant fencing them. But also assuming he was dumb, and he probably was talking out of his ass. That family did own that shop though, and no one ever ate pizza there in the 10 years I saw. I'm so ready for this. I worked with an extreme conspiracy nut. Me and my crew leader at the time were joking about how crazy our co-worker was. I then asked him, "Hey man, are there any conspiracy theories you believe?" He said, "I have one I came up with. Basically the town he lived in is right next to mine. The town he lived in also was always having roads blocked off for construction. Like every day there is a road blocked off somewhere, and it's a pretty small town to be doing all that work all the time. Also the roads over there are downright terrible. Looks like Lightning McQueen paved their roads." So he believes that what is actually happening is the city bought a bunch of those big traffic cones in bulk. He also believes they don't have anywhere to store all the traffic cones. So to deal with the situation they would block off roads and pretend to fix them so they don't have to worry about it. It probably my favorite one. That one and the art industry is just a sham tied to tax breaks theories are definitely the best to me. That there are still boys' bodies buried under an apartment building lawn by John Wayne Gacy at Miami X Elston in Chicago. A couple months ago someone uploaded a new mini docu-series on YouTube about serial killer John Wayne Gacy called Devil in Disguise, which was promptly removed from YouTube, but I still found the full series, perhaps not through the NBC Peacock app. Anyways. Holy fuck, it's driving me bananas. There are reports of Gacy doing yard work at night. Of digging ditches around the building. Of filling the ditches overnight instead of during the day. A man in the documentary was about 8 years old at the time and Gacy paid him to do little things like take out the apartment building trash. He lived across the street from the building and his bedroom window happened to face the lawn where a lot of ditch digging had been happening. He was the one that said they had been filled overnight. He described exactly what shape the ditches were. As an adult, he drew a map for the police who were being pressured into searching the property about where he remembered the ditches being. He said, "There are two places you don't need to dig. One of them is where this bush is. Because the bush was there before I moved there, and the roots are dense, so he couldn't have dug it up and put someone there and put the bush back there." Anyway, so in 2013 the police finally searched the grounds using ground penetrating radar, which can give a fairly accurate hit without digging. In the documentary it is shown that the police barely checked the grounds, and they checked the two places the now adult man said no bodies could be there. Why I am thinking about this again is since about a month and a half ago Indigenous communities in Canada are searching residential school grounds for children and community members that were killed in the schools or buried in unmarked graves. They are using ground penetrating radar to search places that elders/knowledge keepers say there are people. So far 5 places have been searched and there are over 1,500 hits from this radar method. Which is another reason why I cannot believe at all that the police actually searched the grounds. It's like, here's another conspiracy, okay, the Chicago Police Department find bodies, okay, then what? People involved in the original case are still alive. Gacy was probably part of a bigger sex traffic ring which they did not investigate. Politicians, police, and other powerful people were probably involved in the sex traffic ring of teenage boys and young men. Why else not follow any leads on it back then? So some of these people who were part of that original case are still alive, old as F, but alive, and for some reason that shit matters. Additionally, if they found bodies on the apartment grounds, the amount of money that the city would have to come up with and also ask state/feds for to buy the apartment complex to completely fuck it up. Pay off everyone to move out. Then the money to pay all the investigators, engineers, scientists, etc. to get people out of the ground, to demolish and rip stuff apart, to DNA test the found bodies, etc. 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 In the documentary they show you how much people hours and money went into searching Gacy's house. I don't imagine the Chicago police want more bad press dating from the 70s, with a shit ton of their cash flow going to this case again. My mother was married to a guy years ago with a really boring office job. She said she didn't really know what it was because he wasn't allowed to talk about it. One time he had to go to Africa for a business trip, literally all she was told was Africa, not even the damn country, and he needed to get fitted for some special suits and was only allowed to travel in a bulletproof car. My mother didn't question any of this and was just like, okay, just call me when you land. Long story short, he didn't call her, and she couldn't get through to him. Boy was she pissed. So she called his office, demanded to speak to the big boss and asked him if he had landed. They refused to put her through because he was in a meeting. She kept pushing because he hadn't contacted her at all. Finally they connected her to his boss who said he would look into it. A few hours later her husband called. He was very embarrassed about it all because pretty much everyone who was in the area he was in that worked for the same place got a message to the effect of if anyone sees Bedlam's stepdad tell him he needs to call his wife right now. Anyway, they're no longer together and the place he worked for has gone through a pretty huge rebrand the last few years. I.e., barely anyone had heard of it before, they only had nondescript offices, you couldn't apply etc. Now it has a different name and is known as one of the big agencies, signs on their offices, you can openly apply to join. So yeah, he most likely was some kind of spy. And you would never have guessed it, he just looked like a guy you would never suspect. And my overanxious ma got him in trouble during an OP because his dumb ass didn't call home. They never let him live that down. I haven't heard of this JFK theory, but I like a different one more cause it's kind of the simplest explanation. Basically, the Warren Commission's report of the ballistics makes it seem highly likely a round from an AR-15 was one of the shots that hit JFK, The magic bullet. Which doesn't match the sniper Oswald used, but does match the guns the Secret Service agents all around the event were using. In the commotion, it's possible a service agent attempted to return fire in the direction he thought Oswald was firing from, but got confused from the echoing sounds and accidentally hit JFK. It would explain why the report seemed doctored and caused so many conspiracy theories, because the government couldn't let such an embarrassing mistake like that be revealed. This does come from a cracked editor talking about it on a podcast though, so maybe there isn't actually enough hard evidence for this. I just like it for being simple. You can hear the whole story here, starting at 1842.